One bright Sunday morning, with the sun high in the sky, I hopped into my wife's car, setting out to buy a pair of new lawn chairs. On the way, I tuned into NPR's This American Life, letting the captivating stories absorb my attention. During the drive, a mention of a book on the radio intrigued me so much that I felt compelled to jot down its title. Steering with one hand, I reached into the center console with the other, blindly searching through an odd assortment of items buried beneath old CD cases. A crumpled honey wrapper, a folded Starbucks drink packet, a lone quarter, and even a compact folding comb. But what I pulled out wasn't what I expected. It was a package of contraceptives. The discovery startled me so much that my grip on the wheel slackened, and for a split second, I veered dangerously close to the edge of the road. Some moments etched themselves in memory as if time slows to a crawl, and this was one of them. I vividly recall a red Toyota overtaking me on the left, its driver a red-haired girl sporting a glinting earring. Shaken, I brought my attention back to the road and noticed my speed, 34 miles per hour. Dust coated the dashboard like a silent reminder of time's steady march, while the crushed beetles on the windshield whispered of past travels. The light ahead turned green, offering a small, fleeting sense of order amidst my spiraling thoughts. My distracted search resumed, and when I finally retrieved a CD case, its jagged edge scraped against my wrist, jolting me further out of focus. Such unusual sensations disrupted my ability to think clearly. Among the chaos, a troubling question emerged. Is this mine? Could this belong to her? Had I ever truly considered the possibility of infidelity? My thoughts were a tangle of unease and confusion. Was it guilt? Guilt that I might stumble upon a dark truth? Or was it fear of what the truth might mean? Either way, a sense of dread took root. Determined to find clarity, I conducted a thorough search of the car. From the glove compartment to the trunk, every nook and cranny was inspected. I sifted through the door pockets, checked under the seats, and finally, under the passenger seat. My persistence paid off. There, tucked away in a plastic supermarket bag, was a small spiral-bound notebook. My pulse quickened as I unwrapped it and flipped it open. The first 2 pages were blank, adding to the intrigue. As I delved deeper, I discovered a series of cryptic lists. One entry, with its date crossed out, stood out to me. Under ordinary circumstances, these scribbles might have seemed unimportant, but a chilling realization dawned on me. The lists mirrored the schedule of my work-related trips. The crossed-out date corresponded to the time I had fallen ill and stayed home unexpectedly. The earlier discovery of the contraceptive began to feel like a breadcrumb, leading me to piece together a larger, more unsettling puzzle. My mind darted to the hotels I often stayed at on these trips, Holiday Inn, Quality Inn, and the evidence began forming an undeniable narrative. The entries pointed to a planned rendezvous at the Travelodge or Holiday Inn the next day at precisely 1:30 p.m. My stomach sank as a mix of disbelief and despair washed over me. I clung to the hope that I had misunderstood, that there was another explanation. But the contraceptive seemed to scream the truth I didn't want to face. The crushing realization hit me. My wife had been having an affair for 4 months. This wasn't an isolated incident, but an ongoing betrayal. The evidence didn't just suggest infidelity. It revealed intent and premeditation. My suspicion grew that the notebook held more secrets, a carefully curated list of meetings and lies. The weight of it all struck me like a physical blow. In that moment, I felt as though I was losing her entirely. Conflicting emotions churned within me. A part of me burned with anger, feeling she no longer deserved my love or attention. Yet, another part clung to the love we had shared, unwilling to let go. The thought of confronting her and facing this painful truth filled me with dread. My mind spiraled with questions. How do I move forward from this? Could she have been hiding something more sinister, like illegal activity? What if she was running a secret business or even in love with someone else? Could it be another woman? These thoughts overwhelmed me, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty and despair. I closed my eyes for a moment, shaking my head, utterly lost. Emotions tangled within me. Hurt, anger, love, and fear, threatening to pull me under. Without enough information to piece everything together, I felt utterly lost about how to confront her or even begin a conversation. Scenarios swirled in my mind like a storm. Would she confess with remorse, saying something like, "I'm so sorry, my love. I never wanted you to find out. Please forgive me. I've made a terrible mistake, and now I must leave you." Or would she weave a narrative filled with accusations, perhaps claiming she was coerced into an affair by someone unknown? Maybe she'd turn the tables, blaming me entirely, insisting that my frequent absences and mistrust had pushed her to seek revenge. The possibilities were endless, leaving me to wrestle with the unknown. Then came the most startling revelation of all. She had discovered my infertility. In a desperate quest for pregnancy, she had been unfaithful with my own brother. The mere thought made my skin crawl, sending shivers down my spine. This truth brought the depth of our relationship's deceptions into sharp focus. Am I truly infertile? And why keep everything hidden? Yet, within the swirl of emotions, an odd reminder tugged at my mind. I wasn't just an ordinary man. I had supernatural abilities as a vampire, working covertly as a secret agent. My mission was highly classified, yet my intentions were noble. Darling, if only you knew. Everything I do is for the greater good of our country. Carefully, I placed the contraceptive and the notebook back where I'd found them. A profound sadness settled over me, so heavy that it felt as if gravity was pulling my face downward more intensely than usual. I didn't know how to process it all. From everything I had read about infidelity, I understood that it sometimes stemmed from personal unhappiness. Could I have been a part of the problem? Was I, in some way, responsible?
Even in my pyn, my sense of self held firm.
This wasn't the end of my life, but it was a staggering blow. Resentment, anger, sadness, and confusion churned inside me like a storm. In those dark moments, I questioned everything. Had I made the wrong choices in life? Was I inherently flawed? Did I need to change who I was entirely? That night, I wore a mask of composure. When Emily tried to chat about a book she was reading, I feigned preoccupation, claiming I had a stressful week ahead. "I'm sorry, my love," I said, forcing a small, distant smile. "I feel a little off tonight." She retreated to the bedroom with her book while I busied myself with chores, lingering in the kitchen until I was certain she had fallen asleep. The next morning, I got dressed quickly and left the house without saying much. By 10 a.m., I was parked outside the old Holiday Inn, the location that had haunted my thoughts. Unlike newer hotels, this one let guests park directly next to their rooms, bypassing the need to go through the lobby. Desperation drove me to take an uncharacteristic approach. I'll admit, I'm no good at subterfuge. My instincts are to tell the truth, which has served me well in my line of work. Transparency builds connections, even if it's often one-sided, with others pretending to be genuine only to extract information. Despite my hopes for honesty, I had long abandoned the notion that professional relationships could ever become real friendships. As I walked inside, I greeted the receptionist with a practiced calm. "Good morning," I began. "I believe my wife might be meeting someone here today." The young man, likely in his early 30s, barely reacted. His expression remained composed as I continued. "I suspect she's having an affair, and I'd like to know who she's meeting." Skepticism flickered across his face. "I'm afraid I can't grant you access to that information, sir," he replied firmly. "This hotel prioritizes guest privacy and safety above all else. Without concrete evidence or legal authority, I cannot risk compromising that policy, nor can I confirm if she's even staying here. For all I know, your intentions could pose a threat to her." His words stung, even though I knew they weren't entirely unreasonable. I hesitated before apologizing. "I understand your position," I said, taking a step back, "and I appreciate your caution. She is, in fact, my wife, though I realize I've given you no proof of that." In the back of my mind, I recalled advice from my first boss. When entering unfamiliar territory, allow extra time. Things rarely go as planned. If my life were some crime thriller, I might have slid a $20 bill discreetly across the counter to gain access to the surveillance footage. But bribery wasn't my style. Instead, I leaned on my strengths, negotiation, and diplomacy. Over the years, I had mastered the art of finding mutually beneficial solutions, even in the most challenging situations. This, I thought, would be no different. The receptionist and I ended up having a thoughtful discussion, during which he recognized that allowing me to view the security monitors under his supervision might be the most practical solution. This arrangement ensured my actions would remain transparent and prevent me from taking any unpredictable measures outside the hotel grounds. He understood that if I left unsatisfied, I could linger in the vicinity, potentially creating complications that could escalate into legal concerns for the hotel. To minimize risks, he decided it was better to keep me on site. Reaching compromises that work for everyone gives me a certain sense of accomplishment, and this situation was no different. To break the ice further, I offered to buy us lunch at Subway. I chose a classic tuna sub for myself, while he opted for chicken with bacon and ranch. After parking my car across the street, I returned to the hotel, and we ended up watching the noon news together. As we ate, I shared some details about the notebook and the contraceptives I'd found, weaving them naturally into the conversation. In turn, he opened up about his personal life, touching on family struggles, like his nephew's time in prison and his father's ongoing health issues. Our lunch turned into a casual chat about dieting and nutrition. He mentioned trying the Atkins diet, and we laughed about how the real challenge of any diet isn't losing weight, it's keeping it off. Oddly enough, for two strangers whose paths were unlikely to cross again, we found a strange camaraderie in the moment. At exactly 1:25, she arrived. I saw her car pull into the lot, parking discreetly by the back entrance, farthest from the street. She stayed in the vehicle, engaged in a phone call, her face clearly visible on the monitor. Once she hung up, she glanced into the rearview mirror, fiddling absently with a strand of her hair. At 1:30 sharp, a sleek blue BMW pulled up beside her car. Out stepped a tall man with thick brown hair, moving with an air of ease toward the hotel entrance. He handed over a keycard at the front desk, then turned, his gaze drifting toward her car. She responded by opening the door, pausing briefly to check her reflection one last time before stepping out. The man waited for her near the entrance. As she approached, he reached out, wrapping an arm around her waist with a familiarity that stung. She didn't pull away. Together, they walked inside, the door closing softly behind them, leaving their private world intact and me on the outside looking in. The concept of an affair is easy to comprehend on a surface level. Many of us have entertained fleeting infatuations, and with effort and time, it's possible to recover from their sting. Yet, this was no casual dalliance, it had crossed into something deeper. Betrayal cuts sharper when it involves not just your partner but someone close to you. The worst kind of betrayal is when it comes from your greatest rival, someone whose cruelty feels like being reduced to nothing more than the dirt beneath their shoes. Moments like this make you question everything, your instincts, your values, and even your sense of reality. You wonder if you've been hopelessly drawn to a false persona, deceived by someone who could rival Delilah herself, whispering sweetness in your ear while plotting your downfall. This wasn't a scenario of extremes. It wasn't the best or worst kind of betrayal. Instead, it lingered in the murky in-between, a layered mess of complexities. There were two betrayals here, one from her and another from the man. If he were just some casual acquaintance, a golf partner, or the husband of one of her friends, his actions would carry less weight. He'd simply be another person who disrespected boundaries. But if he were someone closer, my father, my brother, a betrayal like that would cut even deeper than hers. Blood ties complicate things. A wife isn't related by blood, after all. Even in moments of fiery anger, when you might want to physically confront your brother, familial bonds have a way of eclipsing everything else. You might end up choosing family over marriage, no matter how bitter the betrayal. She had begun an affair with your closest friend, David, shattering not only your friendship, but also the foundation of your marriage. David had stood beside you as your best man on your wedding day, just as you had stood for his younger brother at his. Your bond with David stretched back 2 decades to when you were 7 years old. He had witnessed your deep devotion to Emily and knew the value you placed on trust in your marriage. This betrayal wasn't just a breach of loyalty. It cuts straight to the core of your shared history, leaving your once solid relationship in tatters. Yet, amidst all this turmoil, your understanding with the hotel receptionist remained intact. A firm handshake cemented the unspoken agreement that camaraderie over drinks or basketball wouldn't be tainted by misunderstandings. You crossed the street and found refuge at the golf course, where you threw yourself into hitting golf balls. With each swing, the club felt like an extension of your arm, the shots clean and satisfying. The 4-iron, in particular, became your weapon of choice, sending balls soaring high and far with precision. For a fleeting moment, the clarity and control golf offered felt like an antidote to the chaos elsewhere in your life. Invigorated, you decided to call David at home. Sarah, his wife, answered, and after a brief exchange, you invited them both to dinner at Sio's at 7 o'clock. Feeling oddly victorious, much like after nailing a perfect shot with the 4-iron, you followed up by calling Emily. Leaving her messages both at home and on her mobile, you made sure she'd meet you at the restaurant as well. When you arrived home an hour early, you noticed Emily was already in the shower. Her gym bag lay open on the floor, tempting you with its contents. Despite your reservations, curiosity got the better of you, and you rifled through it, hoping for some sort of clue. But there was nothing of note, only the mundane items one would expect. "Hey, I'm hopping in the shower," you called out, unsure if this might be the last moment of normalcy before the dam broke. As you joined her, she nestled close, her breath still heavy from exertion. She spoke with a tone of satisfaction, her words carrying an unmistakable warmth that momentarily eased your doubts. In that shared moment of vulnerability, her passion and tenderness rekindled a flicker of hope in your heart. Later, at the restaurant, you were seated with David, Sarah, and Emily, trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy. The conversation flowed easily, but the weight of what you needed to say loomed over you. Gathering your courage, you posed a loaded question. What would you do if your best friend betrayed you? Or worse, if your spouse had an affair with your best friend? The table fell silent, the air thick with tension. Emily's hand found yours, a small gesture of reassurance, while David avoided your gaze. His silence spoke volumes. Sarah's sharp instincts quickly pieced together the truth, and without warning, she lashed out, striking David square in the face. The slap reverberated through the room, punctuating the gravity of the situation. For a moment, everything froze. Memories of your friendship with David flooded your mind. Playing ball together as kids, sharing secrets behind the old oak tree, debating who was the fastest runner or the better Formula One driver, and even your clumsy teenage attempts to unbutton bras. Those moments seemed almost surreal now, eclipsed by the harsh reality of betrayal. David's usual quick wit was nowhere to be found. Instead, he stumbled over his words, trying to explain, but Sarah cut him off with another resounding slap. The second blow felt like punctuation, an exclamation mark underscoring his guilt. Turning to Emily, you asked the question you'd been dreading. What do we do now? Do we try to reconcile? Or is this the end? Your words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of heartbreak and uncertainty. As David faltered again, Sarah's fury reignited, her hand connecting with his face once more. Time seemed to slow as you observed the scene, caught between reliving the innocent bond you once shared with him and reckoning with the magnitude of his betrayal. The sound of Sarah's slap broke through the haze of memories, jolting everyone back to the stark reality of the moment. Amidst the unfolding chaos, you still held Emily's hand, though her grip had gone stiff. Suddenly, Sarah shot up from the table, grabbed her purse, and stormed out without a word. The abruptness of her departure contrasted with your eerie calm. "Could you pay the bill?" you asked David evenly, your voice void of emotion. Then, gesturing toward the leftovers, you added, "You might as well take those too." Rising from your seat, you turned to Emily. "Let's go," you said simply. Without hesitation, Emily slipped out from behind the table and followed you to the car. As the two of you walked in silence, Emily's first words cracked under the weight of remorse. "I'm really sorry," she whispered. You replied coldly, echoing her phrase, "I'm really sorry," but your tone carried no forgiveness, only biting sarcasm. "Nice. Sorry for what?" Sorry you got caught? Sorry you hurt me? Sorry you destroyed our marriage? Or sorry for seducing my best friend? For what exactly are you sorry? Each word was sharp, cutting through her feeble apology. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, small but genuine, streaking her cheeks. You gripped the steering wheel tightly, driving on as a storm of emotions brewed within you. When she tried to explain, you raised your hand abruptly, silencing her. She fell quiet, pressing her hand to her forehead and choking on her sobs. The car came to a stop, and you spoke with a firmness that left no room for argument. Get out. Emily's head snapped up, and she peered through the window, realizing you were parked in front of her parents' house. She groaned, "No, get out," you repeated, tapping the steering wheel in frustration. "I'm not asking." When she hesitated, your patience snapped. "Get out," you shouted, refusing to meet her gaze. As soon as she stepped out, you drove away without a backward glance, leaving her standing on the curb. Back at home, you initially planned to drown your sorrows with a strong drink and mindless television. But an uncontrollable wave of anger consumed you. You found yourself in Emily's closet, overcome by a swirling mix of rage and heartbreak. With no clear thought, you yanked clothes off hangers, grabbing at buttons and tearing seams. Each rip felt like a release, but it wasn't enough. Storming into the kitchen, you returned with a chef's knife. Fueled by fury, you began slashing through her clothes, the blade slicing through fabric with violent precision. Still unsatisfied, you set a fire in the fireplace and tossed your wedding album into the flames. The photos curled and blackened, their memories vanishing into ash. In a final act of rebellion, you grabbed handfuls of her underwear and fed them to the fire, mesmerized by the flames consuming each delicate piece. Eventually, you collapsed into an armchair, a numb spectator to a classic football match playing on the TV. But the game barely registered as exhaustion pulled you under. The night passed slowly, filled with the torment of knowing how deeply jealousy and anger could wound. Every moment felt significant yet brought no solace, leaving you hollow. When morning came, a strange calmness settled over you. The house was eerily quiet, save for the chaos in the bedroom. Torn clothes lay scattered around the closet, while the fireplace held the charred remnants of your wedding album and burned lingerie. You didn't bother cleaning up. Instead, you stepped into the shower, letting the water wash over you. Memories of intimacy with Emily flickered through your mind, starkly contrasted by the realization that life as you knew it had shifted irreversibly. Determined to confront the situation head-on, you called David. To your surprise, he answered quickly, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm sorry," he began, his tone sincere. He explained how it started as harmless flirting, a few careless words that spiraled out of control. He admitted to running into Emily at the mall, a chance meeting that escalated into something neither of them could take back. "It was impulsive," he confessed. "A mistake I'll regret forever." But his words, though remorseful, brought no comfort. The damage had already been done, and the weight of it pressed down on you like a heavy stone. As I listened to David, I could tell there was more he wanted to say, so I waited in silence. He revealed that neither he nor Emily had ever intended for Sarah or me to discover their affair. Yet, despite their guilt, they couldn't resist the pull of their attraction, allowing it to continue. In that instant, my resolve crystallized. I knew exactly how to handle this. "David," I began, my voice sharp and deliberate, "our friendship is over. I don't care what happens between you and Sarah. As far as I'm concerned, you no longer exist in my life. Goodbye." Before he could finish speaking, I ended the call. Despite the regret evident in his voice, despite his admission of weakness, his betrayal was unforgivable. His choices had severed a bond of trust that could never be repaired. Without hesitation, I drove to Emily's parents' house. When I knocked on the door, her father opened it with an expression that combined sadness and anxiety. "How are you holding up?" I asked, stepping onto the porch. He sighed deeply, partially closing the door behind him. "She told us," he said, his tone heavy with disappointment. "You know she loves you, right?" He searched my face for a response, then shook his head. How foolish she's been. It's hard for me to even say it, but yes, foolish. I don't want to excuse her actions, but I believe she knows she's made a terrible mistake. Foolish, he repeated almost to himself. So foolish. He fell silent for a moment, then gestured inside. She's in the kitchen. I followed him into the house, where Emily sat at the kitchen table, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Her mother stood nearby, a quiet presence, while her father sipped water in small, deliberate gulps. I sat down, struggling to find the right words. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. Here's what I've decided. I began, my tone steady. Emily nodded weakly, her face reflecting the pain and regret that mirrored my own from the day before. I'm filing for divorce, I said firmly. There's no point in pretending this marriage can be salvaged. You betrayed me, Emily. You betrayed our vows, our partnership, and everything I believed in. I've made my decision, and it's final. I don't want to be married to you anymore. Emily's breath hitched, and I pressed on. I know you love me. That's what makes this so painful. But because of that love, I want you to feel the consequences of what you've done. I want you to experience the weight of losing me. A sound escaped her lips, raw and guttural. A noise that blurred the line between pain and something deeper, something primal. It unsettled me, but I pushed forward. Are you listening, Emily? I asked, leaning slightly forward. She lowered her head, offering a silent nod. When the divorce is finalized, and that won't happen quickly, we can discuss the possibility of starting over. But it won't be the same. If you want a chance to be with me again, you'll need to prove yourself. You'll need to show me that you're the kind of person I can trust and love. Only then, maybe, can we consider dating again. But make no mistake, this marriage is over. It's history. I looked into her tear-filled eyes and softened my tone, though my resolve remained firm. I loved you once. Now, I'm giving you the chance to make me fall in love with you again. If you truly love me, you'll work for it. You'll prove yourself. Emily nodded slowly, her lips pressed together in quiet contemplation. The days that followed were defined by distance. The divorce process began, and we sold our apartment. Emily moved back in with her parents while I searched for a new place to call home. I avoided speaking to her directly, letting our lawyers handle the necessary communication. When I occasionally ran into her father, our conversations were polite but superficial. I never asked about Emily, but in those fleeting exchanges, I made sure he understood that my decision hadn't changed. This chapter of my life, I realized, was one I would close on my own terms. The divorce was finalized in just 4 months. Ironically, less time than Emily had spent carrying on her affair with David. Sarah reached out to me twice after the confrontation at the restaurant. I explained the divorce and made it clear that I would only consider rebuilding a relationship with her if she completely distanced herself from David and took accountability for her actions. Surprisingly, she didn't contact me again. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that she and David began attending counseling sessions to salvage their relationship. Meanwhile, I threw myself into a different kind of therapy, a vacation full of adventure. Hiking and rock climbing in Chile became my escape. Scaling mountains and pushing my body to its limits allowed me to clear my mind. For the first time in months, I felt free from the heaviness of betrayal. Upon returning home, I found a message from Emily on my work answering machine. It was short but probing, asking about when we might talk again. While riding in a taxi from the airport, I decided to call her back. My tone was casual but direct, a reflection of the no-nonsense approach I had adopted since everything fell apart. Hello, Emily. I just got back to the city, I told her. After a pause, I asked, do you want to continue our conversation? She agreed, and I proposed meeting that afternoon for a drink. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted her in a booth, nervously clutching a glass of water. I slid into the seat across from her. Our eyes met briefly, and I nodded in greeting. Without small talk, I got straight to the point. Is there anything you want to say? I asked. Or anything you suggest? Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the glass. I want to give this a chance, I continued. emphasizing my willingness to listen if she truly wanted to move forward. But tell me, what do you want? The tension in the air was palpable. Emily closed her eyes, clearly searching for the right words. Finally, she whispered, "Should I apologize? What should I do?" Her voice wavered with uncertainty. And then, in an even softer voice, she added something that made my heart stop. "I'm expecting a baby." Her words hit me like a punch. My eyes instinctively dropped to her stomach, where I noticed how her dress concealed her figure. It was loose, deliberately so. A chilling realization struck me. I didn't know if the baby was mine. Tears streamed down Emily's face as I sat in stunned silence, unable to process her revelation. Eventually, I found my voice. "Does David know about this?" I asked sharply. She nodded hesitantly, then admitted that David had ignored her attempts to tell him. Anger surged through me. Anger at her, at David, and at the mess they had made of all our lives. Without another word, I led her to my car. We drove in tense silence to a clinic, where I insisted on a DNA test. The wait for the results was excruciating. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning as I tried to make sense of everything. By the next afternoon, the clinic called. I drove there with my heart pounding, a mixture of dread and faint hope filling my chest. The results confirmed what I feared most. The child was not mine. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, overwhelmed by sorrow and disbelief. Tears streamed down my face as I wrestled with the finality of it all. Pulling out my phone, I sent Emily a message. "It's over. We can't be together anymore." Along with the text, I attached a photo of the DNA test result as proof. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with calls from Emily. I ignored each one, my resolve firm. I couldn't endure more conversations or explanations. Instead, I made a decision that had been building for months. To start over somewhere far away from the shadows of Emily and David. 7 months have passed since then. I blocked Emily and cut ties with all our mutual acquaintances. I bought a small house in a new town and threw myself into work and sports to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating casually, nothing serious, but enough to remind myself that life could still offer moments of joy. Recently, though, my parents shared news about Emily that left me shaken. After receiving my message and the DNA test results, Emily had spiraled into a deep depression. Refusing to eat or leave her bed, she became almost catatonic. Her emotional collapse led to premature labor, and she gave birth to a baby girl diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now, Emily lives with her parents, who help her care for the child. Hearing this brought me to tears. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt and sadness. I had wanted to move on, to erase her from my life, but learning about her suffering and the challenges she now faced reopened wounds I thought had healed. I don't regret my decision to leave, but the weight of the story will always linger. Some scars, I've learned, never fully fade.